In the quiet Belarusian village of Zaitsevo, in 1946, a boy was born who was destined to become an outstanding military leader. Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky, a native of a simple peasant family, rose from a private to a marshal of the Soviet Union, twice hero of the Soviet Union. His life path is a vivid testament to how talent, courage, and perseverance can elevate a person to the pinnacle of military glory. From his first days of service in the Red Army in 1932 to the highest command posts, such is the scale of this remarkable man's personality. The Great Patriotic War became for Yakubovsky a true school of military art. He displayed exceptional qualities as a commander in pivotal battles, from the fiery cauldron of Stalingrad to the storming of Berlin. His talent particularly shone in the tank battles on the Kursk Bulge and during the crossing of the Dnieper. Yakubovsky knew how to make unconventional decisions when there seemed to be no way out, and to inspire soldiers by personal example in the most difficult moments. In the remote Belarusian village of Zaitsevo, lost among the forests and fields of the Vitebsk Governorate, on January 7, 1896, a son, Ivan, was born to the poor peasant Ignaty Yakubovsky. Nothing foretold that this boy from a simple family would one day become an outstanding military leader. Ivan's childhood was typical for a peasant child of that time. From an early age, he knew hard rural labor, helping his father in the field and with household chores. The family lived modestly, sometimes barely getting by, but the parents tried to give their children the most important things: an understanding of the value of labor, honesty, and justice. It was in this simple peasant environment that the future Marshal's character was forged: persistent, tenacious, not afraid of difficulties. Ivan received his primary education at the parish school, where he showed outstanding abilities and a thirst for knowledge. Teachers noted his sharp mind, excellent memory, and determination. However, he couldn't study for long. Necessity forced him to work alongside adults. Yakubovsky's youth coincided with the turbulent years of the First World War, the Revolution, and the Civil War. These historical cataclysms could not but influence the young man's worldview. He saw how the familiar way of life was changing, how old foundations were crumbling, and a new world was being born. At 17, Ivan began working in the local Volost Executive Committee and then taught at a rural school. This work developed in him leadership skills and the ability to find an approach to different people, qualities that later proved invaluable for a military leader. The first serious test for the young Yakubovsky was the Soviet-Polish War of 1920. Although he did not directly participate in the hostilities, the proximity of the front, eyewitness accounts, and the general atmosphere of that time awakened in him an interest in military affairs. He eagerly absorbed information about tactics, strategy, and troop organization. Perhaps it was then that the idea of a military career was born in his mind. The year 1932 was decisive in Ivan Yakubovsky's fate, when he was called up into the ranks of the Red Army. For a village boy, service opened up a new world, a world of discipline, order, and opportunities for self-development. Ivan Yakubovsky's military career began in the autumn of 1932, when he was drafted into the Red Army. For the young Belarusian, who grew up in a peasant environment, the army became a true school of life and the beginning of a great journey. He was assigned to cavalry units, where Ivan's leadership qualities and natural quick wit immediately became apparent. Commanders quickly noticed the determined Red Army soldier, and after just 1 year, Yakubovsky was sent to junior commander courses. Graduating with honors, he received his first officer rank. Army life suited the young commander. He enthusiastically mastered military affairs, showing extraordinary abilities in tactics and strategy. Yakubovsky showed particular interest in the new equipment appearing in the army, tanks and armored vehicles. This fascination determined his further destiny. In 1934, Ivan Ignatievich entered the joint Belarusian military school, named after the Central Executive Committee of the BSSR, where officers for tank troops were trained. His studies came easily to him. His natural quickness of mind, diligence, and existing military experience were evident. In 1935, having successfully graduated from the school, Lieutenant Yakubovsky was sent as a tank platoon commander to the Belarusian military district. This was a time of active rearmament of the Red Army, the introduction of new military equipment and tactics. The young officer enthusiastically mastered new tanks, studying their technical characteristics and combat capabilities. He often stayed in the park after classes to thoroughly understand the design of the machines. This knowledge later proved invaluable on the battlefields. The command quickly appreciated Yakubovsky's abilities. His platoon invariably showed high results in exercises, and the commander himself demonstrated extraordinary skills in managing a unit in difficult conditions. A promotion soon followed. Ivan Ignatievich became a tank company commander. In this position, his organizational talent and ability to work with people became even more apparent. He created a cohesive team where every tanker felt their importance and responsibility. In the pre-war years, Yakubovsky continued to improve his skills. He closely followed the development of military thought, studying the experience of combat operations in Spain and the Far East. The lessons of the Soviet-Finnish War, which showed both the strengths and weaknesses of the Red Army, proved particularly valuable. In 1940, the capable officer was sent to study at the Military Academy of Mechanization and Motorization of the Red Army. Here he gained fundamental knowledge in managing large tank formations, which later played a decisive role in his military career. Pre-war service became a time for Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky to accumulate knowledge and experience, form command skills and military thinking. He rose from a private to an officer, from a platoon commander to a battalion commander. Each step of this path was filled with hard work, a desire for improvement, and a deep study of military affairs. It was in these years that the foundation for the future victories of the talented military leader was laid. On June 22, 1941, the peaceful life of Soviet people was shattered by the roar of enemy bombs. For Major Ivan Yakubovsky, as for millions of his compatriots, the most severe trial of his life began. On the first day of the war, he commanded a training tank battalion at the Minsk Tank School. Upon receiving the order, Yakubovsky immediately began forming a combat unit from cadets and instructors. Within a few days, his battalion engaged in an unequal battle with superior enemy forces near Minsk. Despite the lack of combat experience, Yakubovsky's tankmen acted decisively and skillfully. The commander himself, at critical moments of the battle, personally took the controls of a tank, setting an example of courage. In the most difficult conditions of retreat, when communication was often interrupted and orders did not always reach the units, Yakubovsky's outstanding qualities as a commander became apparent. He never lost his composure, was able to quickly assess the changing situation and make the only correct decisions. In August 1941, Yakubovsky was given command of a tank regiment. This was a serious promotion, indicating recognition of his commanding talents. At the head of the regiment, he participated in defensive battles on the approaches to Moscow. Here, his tactical gift was fully manifested. Skillfully maneuvering small groups of tanks, Yakubovsky inflicted sensitive blows on the enemy and then quickly changed positions. This tactic disoriented the Germans, forcing them to overestimate the strength of Soviet troops. In December 1941, Yakubovsky's regiment took part in the counteroffensive near Moscow. This was the first major offensive operation for the young commander. Despite severe frosts, a shortage of fuel and ammunition, Yakubovsky's tankmen acted decisively and effectively. They broke through enemy defenses, reached enemy communications, and sowed panic in their rear. For his skillful leadership of the regiment in these battles, Ivan Ignatievich was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. The first months of the war became a harsh school for Yakubovsky. He learned to fight not from textbooks, but in real battles, where the price of error was human lives. Every day brought new experience, forcing him to reconsider pre-war ideas about tank tactics. Yakubovsky quickly realized that in modern warfare, victory goes to whoever can concentrate forces in decisive directions, act swiftly and unexpectedly for the enemy. Ivan Ignatievich paid special attention to the interaction of tanks with infantry, artillery, and aviation. He understood that only coordinated actions of all branches of service could bring success. This understanding, gained through suffering in the heavy battles of '41, subsequently became the basis of his military art. By the spring of 1942, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubovsky was already an experienced commander, with participation in defensive and offensive operations behind him. He was noticed by the high command, and soon he received a new appointment, commander of a tank brigade. New trials and new victories awaited him. By the summer of 1942, the war had reached the Volga. Stalingrad became the pivotal point of confrontation between the two armies, the place where the fate of the entire campaign was decided. It was here that Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Yakubovsky was to prove himself as a talented commander of tank units. His brigade became part of the 62nd Army, which defended the northern approaches to the city. In August, when German forces launched a massive offensive, Yakubovsky's tankmen found themselves at the spearhead of the attack. In a critical situation, Ivan Ignatievich made an unconventional decision: to disperse the tanks into small groups and operate from ambushes. This allowed for the most effective use of limited forces and inflicted significant blows on the enemy. German tank columns, advancing across the steppe expanses, suddenly came under flanking fire from camouflaged Soviet vehicles. Yakubovsky's command talent was particularly evident in the September battles for Mamayev-Kurgan. When the Germans broke through the defenses and created a threat of reaching the Volga, Ivan Ignatievich personally led the counterattack. Under heavy fire, he led his tanks to the flank of the advancing enemy. The sudden strike sowed panic among the German units and allowed the situation to be restored. In this battle, Yakubovsky's tank was hit and the commander was wounded, but he continued to direct the brigade's actions until the combat mission was completed. For this feat, he was awarded the Order of Lenin. In the conditions of fierce urban battles, Yakubovsky developed a special tactic for the use of tanks. He created assault groups where each tank operated in close cooperation with an infantry squad. This allowed for effective clearing of blocks, preventing the enemy from using anti-tank weapons. Yakubovsky's tankmen learned to fight in conditions of limited visibility, amidst ruins and barricades. They used every cover, every projection of a wall to protect their vehicles. In November, when Operation '0 to encircle the German grouping began, Yakubovsky's brigade operated as part of a mobile group. The tankmen swiftly broke through the enemy's defenses and rushed into his rear. In 3 days, they advanced over 100 kilometers with battles, cutting enemy communications and creating chaos in his positions. Yakubovsky skillfully organized interaction with cavalry units, which significantly increased the pace of the offensive. When the encirclement ring closed, Yakubovsky's brigade took up positions on the inner front of the encirclement, repelling desperate attempts by the Germans to break through. In these battles, Ivan Ignatievich showed himself to be a master of defensive actions. He created a deeply echeloned system of anti-tank strongholds, skillfully maneuvered reserves, delivering counterattacks against enemy groups that had broken through. The Battle of Stalingrad became a real school of military art for Yakubovsky. Here his command style was finally formed, a combination of careful planning with decisiveness in execution, the ability to find unconventional solutions in critical situations, and the ability to inspire subordinates by personal example. For the Battle of Stalingrad, Ivan Ignatievich was promoted to colonel and received a new appointment. New battles awaited him, where his military talent would be fully revealed. By the summer of 1943, Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky, who already had experience in the toughest battles near Moscow and Stalingrad, took command of the 17th Guards Tank Brigade. Ahead of him awaited a trial that would go down in history as the greatest tank battle, the Battle of Kursk. The Soviet command, having received intelligence about the impending German offensive, created a powerful defense on the Kursk salient. Yakubovsky meticulously prepared his brigade for the upcoming battles. He personally inspected each tank, conversed with the crews, and shared his experience from the Stalingrad battles. He paid special attention to coordination with artillery and infantry. He had well learned the lesson that modern combat is the coordinated action of all branches of service. On July 5th, when German tank columns launched their offensive, Yakubovsky's brigade took up positions in the second echelon of defense. Ivan Ignatievich closely monitored the developments, preparing to enter the battle at the decisive moment. This moment came on the second day of the battle, when German tanks broke through the first line of defense and surged forward. By order of the Army Command, Yakubovsky moved his brigade to meet the enemy. He employed a tactical maneuver that became his signature style, a flanking maneuver. Dividing the brigade into 3 groups, he sent 2 of them to bypass the advancing enemy and kept the central group in ambush. When the German tanks entered the formed corridor, Yakubovsky gave the order for a simultaneous attack. The enemy found themselves in a fire trap. Their vehicles burned, hit from 3 sides. In this battle, Yakubovsky's tankmen destroyed more than 30 German tanks, including the newest Tigers and Panthers. Yakubovsky's command talent was particularly evident on July 11th, at the height of the defensive phase of the battle. The German command threw a large tank grouping into the breach, creating a threat to the rear of Soviet troops. Yakubovsky's brigade received orders to stop the enemy at all costs. Assessing the situation, Ivan Ignatievich made a bold decision: to attack the superior enemy forces. He understood that delay was akin to death, and only decisive action could save the situation. Personally leading the attack, Yakubovsky, in his tank, broke into the enemy's battle formations. His fearlessness inspired the tankmen. They followed their commander, firing on the move. The suddenness of the strike and the desperate bravery of the Soviet tankmen sowed panic among the Germans. They began to retreat, abandoning equipment. For this battle, Ivan Ignatievich was awarded the Order of Suvorov, 3rd class. When the famous Prokhorovka tank battle began on July 12th, Yakubovsky's brigade operated on its flank. Here, Ivan Ignatievich's ability to interact with other branches of service was fully demonstrated. He masterfully coordinated the actions of his tanks with artillery, which allowed for maximum damage to the enemy. After the Soviet troops went on the counteroffensive, Yakubovsky's brigade acted in the vanguard. The tank men rapidly advanced, not allowing the enemy to consolidate on intermediate lines. In 2 weeks, they fought their way over 150 kilometers, liberating dozens of settlements. The Battle of Kursk became Colonel Yakubovsky's finest hour. Here, his talent as a tactician and organizer was fully revealed. He proved himself a master of both defensive and offensive operations. Ivan Ignatievich's main quality was his ability to quickly assess the situation and make the only correct decisions in critical situations. No less important was his ability to inspire his subordinates with his personal example of courage and coolness. After the Battle of Kursk, Yakubovsky received a new appointment. He became deputy commander of a tank corps. Ahead of him awaited a new challenge, the forcing of the Dnieper and the liberation of Kyiv. In the autumn of 1943, after the defeat of German troops at the Battle of Kursk, the Soviet army faced a new strategic objective, the crossing of the Dnieper. This wide, full-flowing river represented a formidable natural barrier which the German command had integrated into their eastern wall. It was here that Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky, newly appointed deputy commander of the tank corps, was to display not only personal courage, but also exceptional military leadership. The Germans considered the Dnieper an insurmountable obstacle. The high right bank had been transformed into a continuous line of fortifications, pillboxes, bunkers, minefields, anti-tank ditches. Overcoming such defenses seemed impossible, but Yakubovsky thought otherwise. He proposed a daring plan: to cross the Dnieper on the move, without allowing the enemy to recover from their retreat. The command approved this idea, and the tank corps rushed towards the river. Upon reaching the Dnieper, near the village of Grigorievka, Yakubovsky's tankers discovered that all crossings had been destroyed. There was no time to wait for pontoon units. Every hour of delay allowed the Germans to strengthen their defenses. And then, Ivan Ignatievich made an unconventional decision. He ordered the collection of all available means, fishing boats, rafts, barrels, and the immediate crossing of advanced detachments. Yakubovsky himself was among the first to cross, personally leading the capture of the bridgehead. Under heavy enemy fire, the tankers, temporarily transformed into infantrymen, secured a foothold on the right bank. In the first 24 hours, they repelled 7 fierce counterattacks. The Germans threw tanks, artillery, and aviation into the battle, but could not break the guardsmen's resistance. Yakubovsky was in the most dangerous places, inspiring the soldiers by personal example. When the main forces began to arrive at the bridgehead via the established crossings, Ivan Ignatievich developed a plan to break through the enemy's defenses. He proposed striking the main blow where the enemy least expected it, on a steep, seemingly impassable section for tanks. At night, the tanks were stealthily concentrated in ravines and gullies. At dawn, after a brief but powerful artillery barrage, they surged forward. The surprise and audacity of the attack stunned the enemy. In one day, the tankers advanced 15 kilometers, breaking through a deeply echeloned defense. For his skillful leadership of troops during the Dnieper crossing and the personal courage displayed, by decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR on January 10, 1944, Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, with the Order of Lenin and the Gold Star Medal. This was the highest recognition of his military art and personal bravery. The success on the Dnieper was not accidental. It was the result of meticulous planning, the ability to exploit the element of surprise, and Yakubovsky's capacity to inspire subordinates in the most difficult situations. The crossing of the Dnieper became a turning point in Ivan Ignatievich's military career. Now, the path to new victories lay open before him. Ahead was the operation to liberate Kiev, the ancient capital of Ukraine. After the heroic crossing of the Dnieper, Soviet troops faced the task of liberating Kiev, the ancient capital of Ukraine. By November 1943, Guards Colonel Yakubovsky was appointed commander of the 7th Guards Tank Corps, which was to play a key role in the Kiev offensive operation. Ivan Ignatievich meticulously prepared his units for the upcoming battles. He understood that the liberation of a major city required a special approach. Massive tank attacks alone would not suffice here. Yakubovsky developed a detailed plan of action for urban conditions, where every block could become a battlefield. He paid particular attention to the interaction of tanks with infantry and artillery. Tanks were to advance in small groups, supported by infantrymen who protected them from enemy anti-tank weapons. The offensive began on November 3rd. Yakubovsky's corps operated in the direction of the main thrust. Breaking through the enemy's defenses, the tankers rushed towards the city. Ivan Ignatievich skillfully organized cooperation with aviation, which struck enemy strongholds. When the tanks entered the suburbs of Kiev, fierce street battles began. It was here that Yakubovsky's tactical talent fully manifested itself. He divided his forces into assault groups, each with a clear objective. Tanks moved along parallel streets, preventing the enemy from concentrating their anti-tank weapons. Yakubovsky was constantly in the battle formations, personally adjusting the actions of the units. At a critical moment, when the Germans attempted a counterattack, he led a reserve group of tanks and struck the flank of the advancing enemy. This maneuver decided the outcome of the battle. The Germans were repelled with heavy losses. On November 6, 1943, Kiev was completely liberated. Yakubovsky's corps was among the first to enter the city. For his skillful leadership of the troops, Ivan Ignatievich was awarded the Order of Kutuzov, second class. But the main reward for him was the gratitude of the residents of the liberated capital of Ukraine. The Kiev operation became an important stage in the development of Yakubovsky's military leadership talent. He proved that he could successfully command a large tank formation not only in open terrain, but also in the complex conditions of urban combat. Particularly valuable was the experience of interaction with other branches of troops: infantry, artillery, aviation. This experience would be useful to Ivan Ignatievich in subsequent operations to liberate Europe from Nazism. By July 1944, Guards Major General Ivan Yakubovsky, commander of the 76th Guards Tank Corps, was preparing for a new, large-scale operation. The Lvov-Sandomierz operation was to become one of the largest offensive operations of Soviet troops, the goal of which was the liberation of western Ukraine and the creation of a bridgehead for further advance into German territory. Yakubovsky understood the strategic importance of the upcoming battles. Success here would open the way to the borders of the Third Reich. Carefully studying the terrain maps and intelligence data on the enemy, Ivan Ignatievich developed a detailed action plan for his corps. A key element of the plan was the creation of mobile tank groups capable of quickly breaking through the defenses and developing success in depth. The offensive began on July 13th. Yakubovsky's corps operated as part of the 1st Ukrainian Front in the Lvov direction. The first days of fighting were exceptionally difficult. The enemy had created powerful defenses, saturated with anti-tank artillery. The Germans desperately clung to every line, understanding that retreat would bring the Red Army closer to Germany's borders. In these difficult conditions, Yakubovsky's special gift became evident: his ability to find weak points in the enemy's defenses. He masterfully organized reconnaissance in force, identifying areas where resistance was less organized. It was there that Ivan Ignatievich directed the main thrust of his tank brigades. Having broken through the Germans' tactical defenses, Yakubovsky's tankmen surged forward. The rapid advance of the corps created a threat of encirclement for a large enemy grouping in the Lvov area. The German command was forced to begin withdrawing troops, fearing a repeat of a catastrophe similar to Stalingrad. On July 27th, Lvov was liberated, but Yakubovsky did not allow his units to linger in the city. He understood that the main task of a tank corps was to pursue the retreating enemy, not giving him the opportunity to consolidate on new lines. The tankmen continued the offensive, overcoming the resistance of the enemy's rear guards and natural obstacles. The crossing of the San River proved to be an especially difficult challenge. The bridges were blown up, and the opposite bank was fortified. Yakubovsky made a bold decision: to cross the river on the move, using improvised means. Advanced detachments in boats and on rafts seized a bridgehead, and sappers, under enemy fire, built crossings. Tanks went across the river when the pontoon bridge was not yet fully ready. This risk paid off. Surprise ensured the success of the operation. By early August, Yakubovsky's corps reached the Vistula. Here, an even more difficult task lay ahead: to cross the wide, full-flowing river and seize a bridgehead on the western bank. Ivan Ignatievich personally directed the crossing, being at the forward command post. Under his leadership, the Sandomierz bridgehead was created, a strategically important area for a further offensive into Germany. The Germans launched several powerful counterattacks, trying to eliminate the bridgehead. In critical moments, Yakubovsky appeared in the most dangerous sectors, inspiring the tankmen by his personal example. His presence gave the soldiers confidence and resolve. For his skillful leadership of troops during the Lvov-Sandomierz operation, Ivan Ignatievich was awarded the Order of Suvorov, second class. This operation became a vivid testament to Yakubovsky's military talent, his ability to command large tank formations in the difficult conditions of a rapid offensive. January 1945. Soviet troops were preparing for a decisive dash to Berlin. The Vistula-Oder offensive was to become one of the most rapid offensives in the history of the Great Patriotic War. For Lieutenant General Ivan Yakubovsky, commander of the Tank Corps, this was an opportunity to apply all accumulated military experience in an operation of strategic scale. The Sandomierz bridgehead, won with such effort in previous battles, became a springboard for a powerful strike. Yakubovsky meticulously prepared his units for the offensive. He understood that success depended on the speed of the breakthrough and the development of the offensive. Each tank brigade received a clear task. Each commander knew his maneuver. Ivan Ignatievich paid special attention to logistical support. The experience of previous operations showed that even the most rapid offensive could stall due to a shortage of fuel and ammunition. Yakubovsky created mobile repair brigades that followed directly behind the tank units, restoring damaged equipment right on the battlefield. On January 12th, after powerful artillery preparation, Yakubovsky's tanks rushed forward. Breaking through the enemy's defenses, they burst into operational space. Ivan Ignatievich was in the first echelon of the advancing troops, personally leading the corps' actions. He masterfully applied the tactic of quote zero, concentrated strikes on the most vulnerable sections of the enemy's defenses. The German command was not ready for such a pace of advance. Yakubovsky's tank crews advanced at a speed of up to 70 kilometers per day, an unprecedented figure for winter. They bypassed resistance nodes, leaving their blocking to subsequent echelons, and irresistibly pressed forward. When there was a threat of an enemy counterattack on the flank of the advancing units, Yakubovsky made an unconventional decision. Instead of stopping and going on the defensive, he allocated part of the forces to cover the flank, and with the main mass of tanks, continued the offensive. This maneuver disconcerted the German command. They expected a pause, but received a new swift blow. Yakubovsky's command talent was particularly evident when overcoming the Pilitsa River. The bridges were blown up, and the ice cover could not withstand heavy tanks. Ivan Ignatievich organized engineering works with unprecedented speed. Under his leadership, sappers built crossings overnight, and in the morning, the tanks continued their movement. This episode became a textbook example of overcoming a water barrier on the move. By January 19th, Yakubovsky's tank corps had covered more than 200 kilometers and reached the borders of Germany. In 2 weeks of the offensive, his units liberated hundreds of settlements, captured thousands of prisoners, and a huge amount of military equipment. This was a triumph of Ivan Ignatievich's art of command. His corps showed an example of maneuver warfare, a swift breakthrough, and the development of success in depth. April 1945. Soviet troops approached the lair of the fascist beast, Berlin. For Lieutenant General Ivan Yakubovsky, the Berlin operation became the culmination of his military career. Commanding the 7th Guards Tank Corps, he was tasked with breaking through the enemy's defenses on the approaches to the German capital and developing the offensive in the western direction. Yakubovsky personally developed the Corps' action plan, taking into account the specifics of the upcoming urban battles. The experience of Stalingrad and Kiev suggested that tanks were vulnerable in the city, but with proper application, they could become a decisive force. On April 16th, after a powerful artillery barrage, Yakubovsky's tanks went for the breakthrough. Ivan Ignatievich was at the forward observation post, personally coordinating the actions of the brigades. When the advance slowed due to stubborn enemy resistance, he decided to concentrate forces on a narrow sector. This, quote, zero strike proved unexpected for the Germans. The defense was breached. Developing the success, the tankers rushed forward, not allowing the enemy to regroup. The crossing of the Teltow Canal became a particularly difficult test. Yakubovsky employed a tactical maneuver that became his calling card, a diversionary maneuver. While part of the forces simulated preparations for crossing in one sector, the main forces secretly concentrated in another location. The sudden crossing caught the Germans off guard, and the bridgehead was seized with minimal losses. On April 21st, Yakubovsky's tanks entered the suburbs of Berlin. Fierce street battles began here. Ivan Ignatievich divided his forces into assault groups, each of which included tanks, infantry, artillery, and sappers. This organization allowed for effectively overcoming barricades and clearing buildings. Yakubovsky personally instructed the group commanders, sharing his rich experience in urban combat with them. At one critical moment, when the advance stalled due to a powerful defensive stronghold, Ivan Ignatievich arrived at the front line. Assessing the situation, he organized an outflanking maneuver. Part of the tanks broke through courtyards and interblock passages, getting behind the enemy. This bold move decided the outcome of the battle. For his skillful leadership of troops in the Berlin operation, Yakubovsky was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. But the main reward for him was participation in the historic storming of the Reichstag. The tanks of his corps provided fire support to the infantrymen who hoisted the banner of victory over the defeated capital of the Third Reich. The Berlin operation became the pinnacle of Ivan Ignatievich's military art. He proved himself a master of maneuver warfare, capable of finding unconventional solutions in the most difficult situations. His ability to inspire subordinates by personal example, coolness in critical moments, and impeccable tactical flair ensured the success of the units entrusted to him. May 1945. It seemed the war was already over. The victory banner flew over the Reichstag, Berlin had fallen. But in Eastern Germany and Czechoslovakia, a large group of German troops continued to resist. Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky received a new combat mission: to participate in the Prague Offensive, which was to be the final chord of the war in Europe. On May 6th, Yakubovsky's tank corps was put on alert. Intelligence reported that an uprising had begun in Prague, and Czechoslovak patriots urgently needed help. The Germans were massing additional forces around the city to suppress the resistance. Time was of the essence. Yakubovsky immediately began planning a forced march. The main task was to cover over 150 kilometers through mountainous terrain in the shortest possible time. Ivan Ignatievich made an unconventional decision: to divide the corps into several columns, which were to move along parallel routes. This allowed them to avoid traffic jams on narrow mountain roads and reduce deployment time. Each column received a clear objective and an assembly area in the vicinity of Prague. Yakubovsky understood that the success of the operation depended on speed. He personally led the advance detachment, which was to be the first to break through to the rebellious capital. The detachment included the most experienced crews in the most reliable vehicles. The march began on the night of May 7th. The tank crews moved without headlights, guided by glowing pointers set up by scouts. Yakubovsky was in the lead vehicle, constantly maintaining communication with brigade commanders. When one of the columns got stuck due to a collapsed bridge, Ivan Ignatievich immediately dispatched engineering units there and reallocated the routes of other columns. His ability to quickly react to changing circumstances ensured continuous movement. On the morning of May 8th, the advanced units of Yakubovsky's corps engaged German outposts on the approaches to Prague. The enemy tried to delay the Soviet tanks using ambushes and minefields, but Ivan Ignatievich employed tactics honed in previous operations: flanking maneuvers and strikes. Instead of getting involved in protracted battles, the main forces bypassed resistance strongholds, leaving their containment to subsequent echelons. By the evening of May 8th, Yakubovsky's tanks entered the northern suburbs of Prague. Here, they had to coordinate their actions with other formations advancing from different directions. Ivan Ignatievich established direct communication with the commanders of neighboring corps, which helped avoid confusion and possible clashes between their own units. Interaction with the Czech rebels was especially important. Yakubovsky assigned special liaison groups that established contact with the uprising's leadership. The rebels provided valuable information about the location of German units and helped the tank crews navigate the city. On the morning of May 9th, when Germany's surrender had already been announced, isolated groups of SS men were still resisting in Prague. Yakubovsky personally directed the operation to eliminate them, striving to minimize damage to the historic city and casualties among the civilian population. By noon on May 9th, enemy resistance in Prague was completely suppressed. Yakubovsky's tank crews met in the city center with units advancing from other directions. For Ivan Ignatievich and his soldiers, the war was over. For his skillful leadership of troops in the Prague offensive, Yakubovsky was awarded the Order of Suvorov, First Class. The Prague offensive was a fitting culmination of the distinguished tank commander's combat path. It fully demonstrated all of Ivan Ignatievich's qualities as a military leader: decisiveness, the ability to quickly assess the situation, the skill to coordinate the actions of various units, and personal courage. Ivan Yakubovsky's military art represents a unique fusion of traditional Soviet military schooling and innovative approaches forged in the crucible of the Great Patriotic War. Analyzing his command style reveals several key principles that made him an outstanding military leader of his time. First and foremost is his masterful command of the art of maneuver. Unlike many commanders who relied on frontal assaults and overwhelming firepower, Yakubovsky preferred to act unconventionally, using envelopments, flanking movements, and flank attacks. His tank formations often appeared where the enemy least expected them. This tactical flexibility allowed for success with minimal losses. The second distinctive feature of Yakubovsky's military talent was his ability to assess a situation and make decisions in critical circumstances. Contemporaries noted his capacity to quickly analyze the changing picture of battle and find the only correct solution when, it seemed, there was no way out. From Stalingrad to Berlin, his tactical thinking evolved. While at the beginning of the war he relied primarily on personal bravery and decisiveness, by its conclusion he had become a master of complex, combined operations, skillfully employing the interaction of various branches of service. Of particular note is Yakubovsky's developed system for the interaction of tanks with infantry and artillery. In the urban battles for Kiev and Berlin, he created an effective model of assault groups, where each branch of service complemented and supported the other. Tanks provided firepower, infantry protected them from anti-tank weapons, artillery suppressed resistance strongholds, and sappers cleared the way. Such organization allowed for successful operations in the most difficult conditions of urban combat. Yakubovsky's approach to forcing water obstacles was innovative. Traditionally, this was considered a most difficult task for tank forces, requiring lengthy preparation. Ivan Ignatievich developed a method for forcing rivers on the move, giving the enemy no time to organize defenses. This approach was brilliantly demonstrated in the crossing of the Dnieper, Vistula, and Oder. A crucial element of Yakubovsky's command style was his personal presence at critical sectors. In critical moments, he was always within the combat formations, inspiring subordinates by personal example. At the same time, he never replaced the initiative of junior commanders with his own decisions, allowing them to demonstrate independence within the framework of the overall plan. This created an atmosphere of trust and mutual understanding within the subordinate units. With the end of the Great Patriotic War, a new stage in Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky's military career began. The victorious commander of a tank corps, who had fought his way from Stalingrad to Prague, now had to apply his rich combat experience in peacetime. Yakubovsky dedicated the first post-war years to studying at the Military Academy of the General Staff, from which he graduated with a gold medal in 1948. Academic knowledge supplemented his practical experience, forming a military leader of a new generation. In the 1950s, Yakubovsky's career developed rapidly. He commanded a tank army, then headed the troops of the Carpathian Military District. In these positions, his organizational abilities and talent as a military leader were fully manifested. Ivan Ignatievich paid special attention to the combat training of troops, the introduction of new equipment, and tactical methods. The turning point in Yakubovsky's career was 1961, when he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Group of Soviet Forces in Germany. In this responsible position, he proved himself not only as a military leader but also as a subtle diplomat. In the midst of the Cold War, when the international situation was extremely tense, Yakubovsky managed to ensure high combat readiness of the troops without provoking confrontation. In 1967, Ivan Ignatievich's military career reached new heights. He was appointed first Deputy Minister of Defense of the USSR and simultaneously Commander-in-Chief of the Joint Armed Forces of the Warsaw Pact member states. In this position, his strategic talent fully unfolded. Yakubovsky coordinated military cooperation between socialist countries, led large-scale exercises, and improved the collective defense system. He paid special attention to the modernization of the armed forces, the introduction of the latest models of equipment and weaponry. Under his leadership, the armies of the Warsaw Pact countries transformed into a well-coordinated military mechanism capable of confronting NATO forces. The pinnacle of Ivan Ignatievich's military career was his promotion to the rank of Marshal of the Soviet Union in April 1967. This was recognition of his outstanding services to the motherland. In the same year, he was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union for the second time. Yakubovsky became one of the few military leaders to be awarded this highest honor twice. Until the last days of his life, Marshal Yakubovsky remained in his post, devoting all his efforts to strengthening the country's defense capabilities. He passed away on November 12, 1976, and was buried at the Kremlin Wall in Red Square, the highest honor for outstanding figures of the Soviet state. The legacy of Marshal Yakubovsky lives on in modern military science. His experience remains relevant for new generations of defenders of the fatherland. Ivan Ignatievich's military leadership, forged in the fires of the Great Patriotic War, contains lessons of enduring value. Modern tank forces still employ many tactical techniques developed by Yakubovsky: flank envelopments, swift raids into enemy rear areas, effective coordination with other branches of service. His methodology for forcing water obstacles is studied in military academies as a model of military art. Yakubovsky's principles for troop command in rapidly changing environments are especially relevant today. The ability to assess a situation, make decisions, and convey them to implementers in the shortest possible time is a quality necessary for modern commanders in an era of high-tech conflicts. The memory of the outstanding commander is carefully preserved in our country. Streets in many cities of Russia and Belarus are named after him. A memorial museum has been created in his native village of Zaitsevo, where personal belongings, documents, and photographs of the Marshal are collected. A monument to the twice hero of the Soviet Union has been erected in Minsk. Military historians continue to study Yakubovsky's legacy, finding in his actions examples of tactical mastery worthy of imitation. Books dedicated to his life and military activities are published. Documentaries tell of the exploits of tank crews under his command. For modern officers, Ivan Ignatievich remains an example of professional growth, from private to marshal, from platoon commander to head of the Warsaw Pact forces. His biography proves that talent, diligence, and devotion to the motherland can elevate a person to the highest echelons of the military hierarchy. Yakubovsky's legacy is of particular importance for the patriotic education of youth. The story of his life is a vivid example of service to the fatherland. Coming from a simple peasant family, he achieved the pinnacles of military glory thanks to personal qualities, persistence, and courage. Such examples inspire the younger generation, showing that true patriotism is manifested not in loud words, but in concrete deeds and actions. Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky occupies a worthy place in the galaxy of outstanding commanders of the Great Patriotic War. His contribution to the victory is invaluable. From the defense of Moscow to the assault on Berlin, he traversed a glorious combat path, proving himself a talented military leader and a courageous man. The legacy of Marshal Yakubovsky is not only military victories and awards, but also an example of high service to the motherland, which will inspire many generations of defenders of the fatherland to come.